Okay, I think we're all here. We'll get started. I'm Gary Douglas, President of the North Country Chamber of Commerce, and thank you for coming out this morning. This is a changing, evolving situation. So we've had some comments in recent days. We have more today, and things will evolve over the coming weeks. We may be providing other advice and input from the Chamber in the time to come. In life, it's always easy to handle the things that you expect. The challenge and the test is how you handle the unexpected. Those events that hit a region that are beyond the region's control, but then has to respond to unexpectedly, whether it's a decision by a BRAC to close an Air Force base that you thought was going to double in size, and how you responded to that news that day, natural disasters like an ice storm, or global financial events like the collapse of 2008, and now a pandemic. The health matters, those responses and testing and people self-quarantining and provisions that should be made to minimize the whole situation. Those were covered by a group that many of you know covered yesterday. We're part of those conversations on behalf of the employer community, but we're not going to address those today. Mayor, Mike, come on up. You'll be on my left. That was a joke. We're here to talk about what the Chamber has always done in all of the previously mentioned situations and at other times when things happen, the impact business, what we're doing and planning to do on behalf of the regional business community to help them cope, particularly with the now clear economic impacts that are starting to occur and will occur over the next several weeks, maybe the next months, depending on how long it is before we start to come out the other side of this in a way that things can kind of start getting back to normal. Yesterday, I have some copies of this here if you haven't seen it yet. We were caught by surprise. Surprises are always surprising. The Premier of Quebec, somewhat in line with the President and the Governor, in many respects, issued a number of advisories to control and manage the situation in Quebec, and like in New York, canceling major events and many other similar kinds of things. I understand today they closed the schools. But what caught us by surprise in there was an advisory to all residents of Quebec that upon return from any foreign country, and we clarified that yes, that does include the United States, that all returning residents should voluntarily self-quarantine themselves for 14 days. As Montreal's U.S. suburb, you can understand that was a bit surprising. We have been seeking some clarification on that, but it also ramped up the clear reality of the depth of the situation that we are in, the management of various jurisdictions, and how that is only going to accelerate and heighten the economic impacts as we go through this period. To have effectively residents of Quebec, in essence, being told by their government, not in a mandatory way, but it still matters and is certainly going to resonate when your government says something as an official advisory. Basically, you should not travel to the U.S. anymore until this is over and we advise otherwise. That's essentially what was said. So that really accelerated things we were talking about over yesterday afternoon, last night, and this morning, that we were going to lay out some of those things here at this press conference that we are ramping up to try to impact on that. I can tell you in connection with the Quebec advisory, we reached out immediately to our friends in the Quebec government, and they are our friends, to express a couple of concerns. One, friends shouldn't catch friends by surprise. They apologize for that. That's water under the bridge. But secondly, that we hoped, and I had a 30-minute conversation this morning with Nadine Giroux, the Minister for International Relations of the Government of Quebec, a friend who has been here as our guest in Plattsburgh last year, to have a more thorough conversation about the hope for issuance of some clarifications that are maybe a little more nuanced that understand, first of all, the Plattsburgh area is not the same as somebody returning from an extended trip to Florida or Las Vegas or really any place else in the U.S., that there is a naturalness to doing things here, and it's appropriate to reflect that. But also pointing out a couple of specific sectors that are of concern, that their announcement actually created a lot of kind of confusion. Oh my gosh, what do I do? I'll give you a couple of examples. Under NAFTA, there are what is known as trade NAFTA visas. These are for a number of very specific professional categories, which if you have those credentials and you have a relevant job offer in the other country, you have virtually free travel to travel and work in the other country. It's very simple, and so there are a lot of them, particularly in this area. It happens those categories include RNs. And so traditionally through the years, there have been many RNs who have crossed the border to work in our hospitals in Burlington, in Plattsburgh, in other places. Out in western New York, in the Detroit, Windsor area from Canada, there are many hundreds of nurses who commute every day. And so they read that and say, well, does this mean I lose my job? I can't go to work because I'm being advised and every day I return from work I should be self-isolating myself. They're going to consider that for some follow-up advice. Another category I mentioned is, what about the truck driver? You just told the truck driver who on a daily basis is transporting things back and forth across the border between companies in Montreal and Plattsburgh that, you know, he's basically, and I said this half jokingly just to make the point, you're kind of advising him that he's going to work one day out of every 15. He's going to make a delivery one day, self-isolate for 14, then make a delivery one day. I mean, it's not practical. Nuanced advice should be, if it displays any symptoms, there needs to be some more nuance to some of the specific things that need to carry on as much as possible during this period. They have already issued a clarification that this shouldn't be regarded as applying to drivers and to pilots unless they exhibit, feel they exhibit any kind of cold symptoms. So that's a way of saying we're having a conversation with the Quebec government about this. It's a good professional conversation. It will continue. Our Congresswoman, Elise Stefanik, will be having a conversation with the minister at some point today as a follow-up to my conversation. And so we'll continue to have that outreach. We're in this together. Quebec, the North Country, New York are in this together. And that dialogue is going to be important and will continue in many ways over the weeks ahead as it has started over the last 24 hours. There have been some strong actions taken in Quebec, as noted, taken in New York, and taken nationally, and probably about to be taken nationally in Canada. We understand there are going to be some new advisories issued by the Canadian government later today that may be in concert with some of these other strong actions that have been taken by our federal and state governments, and to some degree by the Quebec government and other provinces. The intent of these actions, I think it's fair to say, is not to disrupt business, not to cause economic harm. That's not the intent. That's collateral damage that we'll have to deal with, and in these kinds of situations you have to accept it as necessary, but then work to deal with and address it. The intent is to reduce the ultimate numbers and to reduce the period of time during which we'll be going through this. And so we all want that. And so I say on behalf of the Chamber that while there may be a sense of wanting to react to some of these strong actions by saying, oh, that's overreach, that's overkill, doesn't have to be that strong, you know, this is really being hyped, that certainly we, and I believe our other leaders here in this area, would concur, no, it's not being overhyped. The strong action is strong medicine to make it better faster. And if there was less strong action, then it might actually spike higher and take longer to recover for it. So the hope here that we all hope is that some quick, strong action will in the end be less disruptive than it would have been if we had let things be not quite so tough and then had this thing last longer and therefore the impact be even greater. So I think that is worth saying. As we have done in the past, the Chamber is engaged in addressing the economic impacts and is coming together with the business community and with our other local, state, and federal leaders to do the best we can to help our members get through this and then to recover from economic impact once we do come out the other end of this, again, hopefully sooner rather than later. We have been consulting broadly with our officials, with our members, there's a lot more to come, and engaging in a lot of internal planning amongst the staff here last night and again this morning, and are initiating a number of economic responses which will evolve in the weeks to come, but we want the community, and particularly the business community in the region, to know that we are doing our best to help with this. We will be launching today a Spend Local campaign, somewhat like Small Business Saturday, but under different circumstances and for a more protracted period of time. And we challenge all of our media who are represented here today to join in this. One of the ways that we can assist, particularly our local small businesses, to deal through a period where their Quebec customers may not be coming through the door in the usual numbers, where other tourists and visitors may not be coming through the door, is to maximize our spending on our local businesses. Put the mouse to the side, and instead of buying something from Amazon, make a greater point than ever to buy it from a local small business in the coming weeks. That's one way you can help them get through this. It's a way you can help, everybody can help themselves in terms of sales tax revenues for the county, things of that sort that will certainly take a hit to the degree that purchasing is down from other outside visitors who will be coming in. We're going to tell you a little more about that. We have made arrangements, and starting early next week we'll be engaging in a very broad series of consultations with a number of specific sectors in the hospitality and business community to hear from them firsthand what their impacts are to date, what they are sensing and expecting the impacts will be, to engage in the things that we're ready to help them with, but also hear from them other ways, other things that they need assistance with, other ways that collectively we may do more, or in specific business situations that we might be able to facilitate a contact, provide some advice, do something to help individual businesses. We'll be having those conversations with hundreds of area businesses early next week. That will then feed further evolution of the things that we're talking about here today, and will be shared with our public officials and other partners so that they can be aware of it and factor it into thinking of the continuing response going forward as well. We have been communicating actively, including phone conversations last night and again this morning with Congresswoman Stefanik and with Senator Charles Schumer and his staff, and also have been doing so with Senator Little and Assemblyman Jones about the responses by federal and state governments to provide relief and assistance, disaster relief, if you will, because this is another form of disaster, like a natural event or like a major closure. We've provided input on those. We believe that, again, as early as later today, we will see agreement on a compromise bill in the Congress on this regard. We've had a lot of active conversations about what the makeup of that may be and provided some advice. We expect there will be, for example, some programs through the Small Business Administration for impacted small businesses, providing access to favorable loans as part of recovery. There are conversations still underway today regarding potential direct assistance for impacted small businesses. We'll have to see what the definitions of all these things are, obviously, once everything is done. But some kind of form of direct assistance potentially to small businesses impacted by providing paid leave for employees who may be infected or may need to self-isolate, but really can't take on that cost, particularly when your business is down, to be paying your employees for that. You want to, but it's difficult. Those that do, we're hoping there will be some assistance, and certainly I know all small businesses want to. They care about their employees, they care about their employees' families. But if your business is taking a big hit, it may become impossible to bear some of the costs that they want to bear. For some indication that government will be of some assistance, that may be very helpful. So we'll continue those conversations, and we will then, as these things have been passed, We'll work to get that information out, to get appropriate officials from the appropriate agencies up here for direct interaction and to make clear what it takes to be eligible for various forms of assistance that are passed, and then to facilitate and assist them in availing themselves of those things. We are also in touch very much with our tourism partners. We'll have these conversations with individual businesses next week, but we have been in touch at the highest levels with the I Love New York program in Albany, and are talking to other colleague organizations in the hospitality sector. And we will be devising some amendments, some shifts to our tourism marketing plans for this year. It would be strange if we didn't. We'll be looking at how maybe some of those markets might be shifted. Certainly some of the timing of some outreach and campaigns will be shifted. So again, with some further advice from our hospitality businesses next week, we'll be doing that very soon and letting all of our members know what those adjustments are. We're also talking to our manufacturers about supply chain challenges that some of them already have been engaging and may more so. If truck drivers decide not to drive, for example, or there are other kinds of disruptions in supply chains and keeping things moving, keeping their supplies in place so they can maintain their productivity and their operations. We'll be talking with them to figure out what those are and where there may be opportunities for us to be of some assistance. Where might we facilitate a conversation? Where might we hook them up with somebody who can provide some advice? Where might we put two or more of them together to jointly solve a problem in a supply chain way that may be on their own, they're not really sure how they can do it in the near term. So we're trying to look at all angles of this, and there will be others that will come to our attention, I know, next week. But again, the thrust is that the Chamber is on this on behalf of the business community. We're concerned, we're engaged, we're active. We have a plan, a tack in terms of interaction. We have initial plans that will be launched immediately, and then will be updated and will evolve in the coming weeks as we learn more or as things change. And hopefully with all of that will help most of our small businesses to recover from this and to come out the other end and return to the prosperity that's been enjoyed in the last few years. I'm going to ask my Vice President for Marketing, Christy Kennedy, to provide a little more details on some of the things we're developing.
In true Christy fashion, for most of you who know me, there's always an opportunity and optimism in whatever we're doing. And so with this, we're taking the challenge that we have in front of us, and how can we make this challenge at least a little bit less daunting for our members and our tourism partners. And that's really what we want to do in this. So, as Gary outlined, we're having conversations with all of our hospitality partners. We're asking them what challenges are they seeing, how is this affecting them, and really, what do they hope to achieve? And then what we're going to do is take that information and rework our marketing campaigns. Is it going to adjust timing, as Gary said? Is there a different market that they're seeing strongly all of a sudden coming forward and that we should put a little bit more effort on? So Monday and Tuesday we are doing a bunch of phone calls. We have 5 conference calls to get groups talking and together, and then we'll be reaching out individually as needed. We're looking to talk to lodging and dining, our agritourism business, the wineries, the breweries, especially the maple producers. Right now we have maple season, so we know they have big events that are actually being scaled back and they're reworking, and we want to help continue to foster what we can and help them out with that. Our history, as well as our attractions. You know, the golf course is open usually in early April. They have a strong Canadian presence usually very early on. How is that going to affect them? What can we do to help them? As well as the retailers such as Champlain Centers and other shopping facilities. And our marinas, we've got to talk to them. We don't know, what the long-lasting and how long this is going to last. So let's make sure we're prepared as much as we can. For those companies who may be unable to talk to us by phone or get on one of those conference calls, we've also set up a survey, and that will be available through an e-blast that we're sending out as well as on our website. And that email, or that survey is actually, we're asking the same questions. What are the challenges you're facing? How is it impacting you? Do you expect it to impact you? And then we're going to take those answers again and kind of come up with a new strategy, or an evolving strategy, as I like to say. So more to come there, but we're very optimistic we can at least get the voices heard and take those challenges and start a really good conversation. As Gary mentioned too, we're rolling out today a Shop Local, Buy Local campaign, similar to Small Business Saturday, with the understanding we know shopping local is always important, but right now it's a little bit more important than ever. So put down the online, stop supporting, per se, the online realtors, look in your own backyard, go support them, help keep them afloat in this time when the traffic may slow down of a very large audience. So what we're doing in that whole series as well is we're developing a series of collateral they can use, posters they can hang up on their door that says, hey, thank you. Thank you for understanding, how important your local dollar is to our economy. A series of social media graphics that they can put on their social streams and say, hey, we're open, we're here, we have the things you need, we really appreciate your support, as well as web banners. We're also giving them some verbiage and content that they can place either on their website, around their store, talking points for their staff, anything that's going to help them really continue to grow that message that it's important and we really appreciate you and thank you for understanding how important you shopping here is. We are also looking to work with local media to promote this important message as well. Happy to say Wiry and Eagle Country have fully committed their support in anything that we need, so we do thank them for that as well, and we are looking forward to others coming on board. And with that, we also are going to develop a dedicated webpage on northcountrychamber.com that lists all these resources that we have, but also has a list of businesses who may do home delivery or carside service or other discounts and promotions that they're willing to offer or have available to our local community as well. So everyone is fully aware of what's going on, and we're giving out as much information as possible to help them. And then advocacy as well in the tourism efforts. As I said, the VCB, the Visitors Bureau's efforts, will shift depending on these conversations, and we look forward to that as well. We really want to engage and listen and tweak what we need to make have the most impact as possible and lessen the impact to others. The Adirondack Regional Tourism Council, we sit on that board and that as well, and we help craft a lot of their messaging, so it supports our local messaging. We are in touch with them and talking about how they're changing their paid media strategies, especially based on the feedback we get next week on these calls. We're going to filter that to them so they can also change their messaging. And finally, I Love New York. We are the tourism promotion agency here at the Chamber for I Love New York at the state level. So we have been in touch with Ross and his team at I Love New York. We've heard what they said. Actually, this afternoon I have a phone call with them about kind of what this all means, especially in their new Canadian marketing strategies. So we will keep our hospitality industry really up to date on what's going on in that market as well. So rest assured, I love feedback. We're going to take that feedback and we're going to really tweak and change things as we need to make this the best that we can in this challenging time. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Christine. As I noted, we've been working with Assemblyman Jones and Senator Little actually for several weeks on business-related issues, which now are more important than ever. Happy that Billy Jones could be with us here today to add his comments. He has been the champion of a small business tax reduction bill that is part of the budget discussions underway. We've been happy to support that, as have our colleague chambers from across upstate. And I would suggest to all of Billy's colleagues, it's never been more important to include that than it is now. Billy?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. As Gary had said, we'll get into the my small business tax reduction in a minute. But first and foremost, we want to get the message out there that public health and public safety continues to be the #1 priority. I know that many residents have been calling my office and calling local health departments and to get guidance on that. There are procedures in place, and we are doing that. So first and foremost, we want to say that with public safety, public health is important. But some of these measures that are taken, and obviously with this going on, there is collateral fallout, as Gary had said, and that affects people in our communities. It affects their businesses, our small businesses. Obviously, with some of the issues that arise out of this, it is going to affect them. They're already seeing that. Of course, we see it on the national level when we turn on the national news by the moment, and we all know the story there. But this is what is affecting us locally. There's cancellations of events, there's other things, there's travel not being done by people, so we need now more than ever to support our local businesses. And that, in turn, supports the workers that work at those businesses, because if we don't have the businesses, we don't have the workers, and vice versa. So we really need to concentrate on that. Gary had mentioned now more than ever, my small business tax cut, a bill that I am co-sponsoring, that we're getting through negotiations and budget. It is important that we have that. We need to support our communities and our local businesses, but we understand that this is an ever-evolving situation. We had just discussed it again this morning with my staff, and people are saying they want the answer to this, they want the answer to that, they want the answer to this, and that's certainly understandable. But you have to realize we are in uncharted waters, so to speak, that many of us have not felt this. Gary talked about natural disasters, protocols that are put in place, but this is an ever-evolving situation, it really is. And I do tell people, and I want to put this point out there, getting back to public health and public safety, that it is important. You remain calm a little bit, but if you are feeling the symptoms of this, certainly, and I know it was reiterated yesterday at the press conference, but certainly call your general physician, your doctor, and really press them on what you should be doing. We want answers there, and then if you feel the need, call your local health departments. This is the protocol that the state is putting in place. They are the experts in this field. Nobody up here, well, I don't know, Colin, you probably have some kind of health degree or something, but nobody up here has that. And it's important that we trust upon our professionals to do that. But there are protocols in place. I just want to put that point out there. But getting on to this is going to have a lasting effect. We already see it with our businesses. I was talking to some small businesses last night. They're getting pretty nervous. They actually have had a lot of business in the last couple of days, but as Gary had talked about, that supply chain is the next thing down the road, and if they can't get products to their small businesses, obviously they're going to be in trouble. But we're working on those types of situations. We really are, as leaders here in the community. But I think it is important, as Gary and Chrissy said, we need to support our local businesses. Do it in a safe way. Feel comfortable, but put the mouse away. Support our local businesses. They need it now more than ever. There'll be long-lasting effects from this. Nobody's up here saying that there won't, but we need to take steps right now to ensure that we try to mitigate some of these situations. And I think, or I know that our leaders here in the community are doing that, and we will continue to do that. This is, like I said, we keep evolving in this situation. Every hour there is something new here, and we're trying to stay on it. Be safe, but also be supportive of our neighbors and our local people and our local businesses and our local workers that work in those businesses.
Thank you, Don. Let me just mention that in follow-up to Billy, you mentioned about information and reaching out, finding out what you need to know. Just a reminder that the Chamber put up a coronavirus information and resources page on its website a week ago. We're doing daily updates to that. There's a whole nest of good links there to the proper information, to the CDC, to the State Health Department, to get the real scoop as opposed to looking online and finding what may not be valid or accurate. As well as up-to-date pages with our local hospitals and other healthcare providers, with our county health departments, There's a section with some advisory sites for employers on policies and actions and how to be handling and preparing and doing things in the workplace. And then some downloadable signs in both languages, English and French, for businesses to post to really encourage and remind everybody to actively wash their hands. Something simple like that, but something that's attractive and noticeable that can be downloaded and
Which
printed
we
out.
all should be doing whether this was going on anyway, I just want to add. Some of these measures we should have already been doing or should continue to do.
So that's all there, that's still there. It's been, we've actually been amazed at the volume that page is getting from our membership and their employees looking for information. We will continue to update that, so we would encourage revisiting it over time, because we'll add things. Over the last couple of days, we've added a couple more links that came to our attention to have some good information. At this point, I'll ask the mayor and the supervisor to step up if they have a brief comment they'd like to add, and then we'll take questions.
Thank you. I think you covered an awful lot. Obviously, the state response is leading amongst many of the states in this country, and I appreciate the leadership there and appreciate the leadership in the chamber, sensitive to the businesses that are really being affected by this. You know, in January was China, February was Korea, South Korea, March it's the United States. We've had an opportunity to learn from their experiences. The progression of these infections is now abating in China, starting to abate in Korea, South Korea, and it will abate here too. But the important thing is, what Gary alluded to, is getting on this nice and early. Too little, too late is not going to be the motto in the North Country. Interesting thing about this, we know it's been in New York now, in retrospect, probably about 20 days or so. You never know quite when it's here because it has that incubation period, and many of the people who were first infected and are carriers aren't actually even symptomatic. They're young people who travel a lot, and about 20–30% of the population won't show almost any symptoms at all. So we know it's been here for a little while. The interesting thing about that 20-day point is that if you wait till the 21st day, your incidence of infection, the height of the peak, is actually 40% higher. So doing these things early and with decisive actions actually can end up saving 40% of the lives, 40% of the people getting ill. So it's really important for the public to be very aware that we're going through necessary steps. As you know, the city of Plattsburgh, I think you all received a press release about 10 days ago. We had a press conference 8 days ago, another one yesterday to update you on our practices. It's all about social distancing, keeping the gatherings a little bit smaller, a little bit more at pace. Some of you came to our chamber or council meeting last night and felt it was a little bit unnerving because everybody is spaced out a good 6 feet. But these are necessary and important approaches to this from a public health point of view. So I think we are doing all the right things in our communities. We're sharing the best practices. We're going to make a difference in mitigating this. You saw what SUNY's done. You see what the hospital's doing. We saw what the nursing homes in the city are doing now too. These are all exactly the right things. There's no reason to panic. This is something that we can manage with good science, and I think as every indication we're doing that. By the way, there's a little bit of a silver lining in this. Maybe this one silver lining for the North Country might be people may decide to shop locally forever and see the true value in that slow shopping rather than that fast internet shopping. Another thing that we're hoping for in the city is for people to realize they can get a lot of their business done with our agencies in our city and our communities online more, through exchange of forms, through online bill pay, etc. And that is more efficient for them, more efficient for us, more accessible for those that are disabled, and or in this case, perhaps bedridden or self-quarantined for 14 days. So I think there are many silver linings, as each of the speakers has outlined. There are many silver linings that are going to occur from this, and I'm just grateful as a community that we're on top of it. We recognize it nice and early before the positive cases actually come to Clinton County, and we're in much better shape than some of the other jurisdictions, even in this country, but certainly in other countries that were caught by surprise in this. So thank you all for your efforts. I know it's going to be inconvenient for a while, but North Country resiliency, we're all going to get through this together. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Supervisor?
I'll keep my comments brief, but I'm wrapping up about 20 years here in the North Country, coming on the tail end of the ice storm. And one of the things that I learned very quickly about the North Country is our best resource are the people. The people will rally. We will shop local, I'm confident in that. We will look out for neighbors, our seniors, etc. We just need to be more mindful of the activities that we need to get through this. So together we'll rally. Locally, the town of Plattsburgh will be introducing some additional best practices that we will need to implement as a local government. But I want to actually provide a couple of things. Because in trying times, we often don't take a moment to thank those that are helping us through it. I want to thank our state partners. I want to thank the Chamber. I want to thank Governor Cuomo as well. New York State is leading the way as it relates to this. That should help comfort people in these trying times. It will not be gone tomorrow, but over the course of the next several weeks, and if it goes into months, we will find better means to be a stronger community. The greater Plattsburgh region is without a doubt the economic hub of our region, but there is a reason that people have been investing in this region for years. It's because of the people. So thank you very much, and we look forward to future solutions.
Can I just say one thing? That, the previous speakers had touched on a point, and Gary had just touched on it now. Please, 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 as a public, reach out to a reliable source when you're reading about this and take steps. We don't need any more hysteria behind this in trying times. It's more important than ever to reach a reliable source. Maybe Facebook doesn't know what's going on with this, so please reach out to your local health department, New York State Health. Do the procedure that if you're feeling ill, that I had talked about before, call your physician, read some reliable information, because quite honestly, half of our time is related to dispelling myths, dispelling rumors about this virus. So we are taking the necessary precautions, as was mentioned. We need to look out for our neighbors. We need to look out for our older population right now. They're the most vulnerable in these situations. That's what we're doing. But we need to get the proper information to our residents. And you know what? My phone's ringing off the hook on information that just is not true. And then we give them that proper information. So in these times more than ever, I wrote an article about this a couple of years ago or several months ago, that go to a reliable source. We have reliable sources right here in this room. Reach out, get the proper information, because we don't need that spreading around in our neighborhoods and in our region. That just creates more of a problem when we're dealing with this very serious virus. So just please do that.
Thank you, Billy. We will come out the other end of this. We will be stronger. We will leave no business, no one in fact at all behind in terms of providing a maximum effort to assist them with the impacts that they will feel during this. That's the end message. The Chamber, particularly for the business community, talking from that perspective, we're here, we're engaged, we're listening, we're proactively doing some things. We will proactively do more things as needed, and as we hear from all of you out there in the business community about ways that we can be of further or additional assistance. And when it's all behind us, we know that's when some of the response to the impacts will kick in at a different level, in terms of particularly federal and state assistance programs that will look to maximize, to access the forms of assistance that are being passed. With that, I'd be happy to take some questions.
Okay. I know that you mentioned that you're going to be meeting with businesses next week and calling businesses next week. And Assemblyman Jones mentioned he, talked about an example of a business that he's talked to. What are you hearing right now, even anecdotally, from businesses about their concerns and about what's happening in their businesses?
Mostly, I'd have to say it's been fairly mild, but we can see in recent days, which is why we're now really jumping aboard and doing these things, we can see that's about to change. And it's going to change very quickly. It already is changing very quickly. Because of the strong actions, not because of it, it's because of the disease. But certainly the impacts are going to be accelerated by the strong actions by the governor and the state to do some of those things. The president has eliminated travel for most of Europe, so there are strong federal actions that have some carry-on impacts. And then really yesterday, the advisory that was put up at the Premier of Quebec, given that Montreal is a U.S. suburb, and you start talking about we're advising Quebec citizens during this period to perhaps refrain from traveling to the U.S. Okay, the impacts now are really going to come. I'm sure many Quebecers are still going to be here through this whole thing, because it's voluntary, and they're going to say, I know it's fine, I'm going down visiting my brother, and I'm going down and putting my boat in the water at the marina. But let's take that huge number that do come down routinely at this time of the year, and let's say it cuts for a period of time by 50%. Well, the total is so huge, you cut it by 50%, that impact's going to be felt in the restaurants, it's going to be felt in the stores where they shop, at the marinas, at attractions. We have heard some of the attractions already, even prior to this, we're already anticipating impacts because, for example, one of the largest growth sectors in international tourism, including in the Adirondacks in recent years, have been Chinese tour groups. We're not going to see any Chinese tour groups this year. So already our attractions are anticipating a downturn in the bus groups that we're going to be visiting. Now they'll see some more of that. We're not going to see senior citizen tour groups coming down by bus from Montreal to shop in Plattsburgh for a while until that comes back. So it's clear we're going to start hearing more about the impacts than we have to date. The impacts to date, there were some supply chain interruptions and so on, but it was mostly in anticipation. And that no longer is anticipation, it's here.
Was there a strong concern for the business community after SUNY announced they were going online for the rest of the semester? How will that impact SUNY Plattsburgh students not being here in our business community?
That certainly added to the news this week that, okay, the impacts now that were speculative are now happening and they're real. So it's time to step it up. There's no question that the colleges in the area, I understand the community colleges are staying operational, but it's not just SUNY. Clarkson has just now made a decision that they're advising their students not to come back from spring break they're about to go on, that they're going to go online. So we're going to see more of that. There will certainly again be short-term impacts during that period. A lot of the students, by the way, I want to clarify, because it was clarified for me by SUNY, the SUNY campus is not closing. SUNY employees are still going to be at work. A lot of SUNY students are still going to be on campus, particularly if all of their coursework is not conducive to going entirely online. They have lab work and studio artwork and other things they need to do. That activity on the campus will still be going on. So it won't be 100% shut down of the campuses, and it's important to stress that, but certainly it will have an impact. Just the cancellation of college events. Weekends when parents come and things like that not happening will have impacts. The Strand, Bisley has postponed its shows, so that's going to have an impact on downtown businesses because those people won't be coming out of those shows and then going to the restaurants. So all of these things this week, just a whole series of things where that tipping point clearly had come, that the things that are impactful on business now aren't, well, maybe it'll come to that. It has come to that.
Governor Cuomo yesterday, called off any gatherings of more than 500 people. Below that, going to half capacity. Have anyone up here heard, businesses responding to that and saying, I mean, even bars, right? Like it sounds like there's a big effect to businesses of all sizes and events of all sizes.
Yeah, we don't have as many businesses and restaurants and bars that are of that kind of scale as New York City area or some of the metro cities have. But there are some banquet halls and other places here in the area that certainly, I actually rather doubt that admonition not to do events of that size is really going to be the cause of the fact that people who otherwise would be doing those events aren't doing them. So I think they're self-canceling, they're self-deciding to postpone things, as we have done at the Chamber with the St. Patrick's Breakfast, and now with a couple of other things. Our business after hours this month we will not be going forward. And you're seeing that every day. You're all seeing announcements of various kinds of things. So I'm not sure in that case that, again, the pronouncement from the state is really what's going to have that impact. It was already here. People are self-deciding not to do large events.
And then,
Now, there is at least some opposite end of that. Some of that will transplant later in the year. So there are some things where the economic impact on some things not happening now will have a short-term impact, but you'll see it redone or see people make that trip, reschedule it in the fall, or do that event in the fall instead of in the spring. So some of that economic activity for some of those things will accrue to our benefit later, but there's going to be a rough period where that income isn't coming in the interim.
when it comes to shopping local and spending local, I mean, there's a lot of advisories saying, everybody should be self-isolating. So I'm wondering about that sort of fine line now and after, if and when, Clinton County or Franklin or Essex has a confirmed case of the coronavirus.
Well, people have to make their own decisions, but certainly deciding on purchases that you can make in a local store or making your local Alvashon hardware instead of buying it on Amazon, I don't think is at the crux of where people will be putting themselves at risk. So to the maximum extent that people can and feel comfortable as we go through this thing, to just give an extra thought, I've gotten in the habit that I just go on Amazon and I order things. Maybe I'm going to go over to the hardware store and pick that up, or maybe I'm going to buy it local. Maybe I'm going to buy it now, but I won't pick it up till later. Maybe I'll have it delivered to my house by then, but I'll have it delivered from somebody local and not from Amazon. So I think to the maximum extent as we go through this, that people feel comfortable transplanting online buying or accelerating some other buying they might have done later in the year that could help out the local businesses they care about and want to have survive and thrive, to make those purchases locally. That's the message. Anything else? Okay, thank you all for coming, and thank you to our guests.
Thank you.